And good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the show, the second hour. And of course, today it's no ordinary Tuesday. It's a beautiful Tuesday on the rock. We've been getting good weather, and it makes it even perfect to have this conversation this morning. So let me just put it out there. We're not having an interview. We're having a conversation, all right? So we'll be speaking with our Honorable Prime Minister, who is in studio with us today. And of course, if you've got questions, anything you might need clarification on, feel free to shoot us a message. And if time permits, we'll be more than happy to engage the Prime Minister for you. So once again, welcome everybody. If you're listening on radio, good morning. If you're listening online, welcome to the show. Or if you're, of course, listening viewing via Facebook, remember it's Power 95 FM Grenada on Facebook. So you have the opportunity to view as well on YouTube. So we got you covered practically everywhere. So there's no reason for you to miss this conversation this morning. So without any further ado, let me say a special morning to our Honorable Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. Welcome back to the studio of Power 95.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning to you, and good morning to all of the listeners of Power 95, and especially those who listen to your program.
Thank you so much. So good to have you back. And it's funny, when you walked into the studio, you were like, oh, we have white chair now. And I was about to say the same thing when you came in. I was like, okay, so the last time you were here, we pulled out the black chair. Now today, you got the upgraded version.
Yes.
I mean, so that means you're definitely falling in line with, of course, your portfolio as Prime Minister of Grenada. We had to make sure, you're comfortable and in fitting with what you're about, what you're doing. So it's almost 1 year. And you sat on the black chair a couple months ago. And, we had a really, really good conversation, highlighting the road ahead if you were to be elected. Now, that has become a reality. And you are now the Prime Minister of Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. Now, let's talk about the transition, because you're known as a lawyer.
Yes.
How did you transition from lawyer to Prime Minister? How has that been for you? How has the past couple months been for you?
It's been good. It's been exciting. It's been encouraging. It's been rewarding. Obviously, a lot of hard work. But if the work is fun, it doesn't seem that way. And the time has really flown by. I mean, it's kind of incredible that it's almost a year already. But I think I was well received by the senior public servants and the senior managers of the public service. I think we've been well received by the public workers, so that has made it a lot easier. I think to function and to learn the public service, it's still a learning curve, I think, for all of the ministers, because we've never served before. But I think we also came in on an exciting, intriguing, and very ambitious platform. So I think people were curious to see how we would get on, how we would perform. And I think certainly for the first 6 months, I think, it was an exciting time, because we were able to do a lot of the things that we said we would do. And I think that gave people the confidence that we kind of knew what we were about. Yes, we'd make mistakes, but that, I think, when you look at the country, it's been stable. There's been significant economic growth, even outdoing some of the projections that we had initially in 2022. So I think that has given people the confidence that despite the youthful look of the government in some regards, that we kind of know what we're about. And I think that has allowed us to transition quite relatively smoothly.
And I know it has definitely been a huge change for you. Of course, like you said, from lawyer to now Prime Minister, you practically did whatever you wanted to on your own time. You went out, had a good time. Now, of course, we came in and I saw the gentleman came in early and he was like, I have to do a security sweep. And I'm like, okay. So how do you feel having to do all of that, coming from where you were to where you are now?
Well, that has probably been the biggest challenge, because it means it's a lifestyle change. You can be, I'm a very spontaneous person. And obviously, as Prime Minister, you can't simply get up today and decide you're doing whatever you want when you want. So your life is a little more planned, a lot more planned, a lot more telegraphed. And obviously, you're working with a lot more people. You have to get used to having people around you all the time. I mean, as a lawyer, sometimes I spend long hours by myself, late at night, just getting ready or preparing, closing yourself off from the world. To a large extent, you can't function like that as a Prime Minister, obviously, because of the responsibilities that you have. So I would say the personal lifestyle change has been, in a sense, the most traumatic one that I've had to undergo. I'm learning to cope with it. But the persons who are working with me are also probably learning me, and probably what works best for me as well. So that's just part and parcel of the job that I have to get used to.
Fantastic. All right. So now that we have that out of the way, we can move on to the order of the day, the business of Grenada. You mentioned, of course, one of the challenges being, adapting to this new lifestyle, basically. When you went in, what are some of the expectations you had? Were some of them met, or was some of them things that you could relate to?
Some of them were things I could relate to. Some of the expectations were met, but there were also things that still are a bit shocking. And usually the shocking is on the negative side. But I would certainly say, certainly for example, my experience as Minister of Finance was very rewarding. I think the team at the ministry, despite significant challenges that they've had, have been very responsive, very professional, and also very ideas and implementation oriented. So I think a lot of the accomplishments that we were able to achieve in the first 6 months was largely due to the team, for example, at the Ministry of Finance. So I want to take the opportunity actually to thank them for working with me and the government in making sure that we were able to deliver on many of the things that we said we would do. But at the same time, there are also significant challenges. I think the whole morale of the public service, I think when we entered, was not good. I think we have certainly tried our part to do our best to ensure that that is lifted. And I think we can certainly see signs of that, but there's a long way to go, and there's some significant issues that still need to be addressed going forward. Some of the statutory bodies also, we've found some challenges there. But I would certainly say, I think, that there are a lot of young people within the government and outside of the government who, if given the opportunity and encouragement and the right skill set, will do remarkable things, both in terms of delivering the public service goods as well as private sector business growth. And so we're keen to ensure that we give people the opportunity, because I was given an opportunity with no experience in this job. And so we simply can't judge people by saying they don't have the experience, and so they shouldn't be given the opportunity to get the experience. So I think from an expectation point of view, we certainly look forward to giving more people the experience to contribute and to help Grenada grow.
I'm happy you made that point coming from the Prime Minister, because this is something you hear so many young people complaining about, not giving opportunities, not getting the exposure. And numerous times you'll hear when you knock on a company's door or something, you don't have the experience, but how do you get the experience without getting the experience?
Yeah.
So that is something you hear a lot of young people talking about, wanting opportunities, but you're hearing, you're not experienced enough.
Yeah, and that happens in the public service as well. It's probably most in the public service because, to a large extent, seniority is a big deal in the public service. So you may find that people have to toe the line for a long period of time before they're given opportunities. And to some extent, that is understandable. And traditionally, that perhaps might have been the case. But we live in a world that is a lot more dynamic, a lot more fast-paced. And so we have to give the opportunity for the persons to serve at the highest level that have not served before. In my case, at my ministry, I've had new permanent secretaries who've never had the jobs before, and they're doing well. The cabinet secretary was not a cabinet secretary before, ever, was not a permanent secretary until she acted in my ministry. And there are several other areas where persons have gotten opportunities, I think, at a management level. In my view, they're doing well. So I think we certainly, that's not to say, of course, that you don't want experience. Persons are wrong. We obviously still need them for the mentoring, but you need a balance. And we also have to face the fact that Grenada has a very young population. And when you look at the public service as well, you would see that it reflects that. And so we have to give people the opportunity. And what is experience is oftentimes debatable. And how long do you need to be around is also debatable. Many times when people say people are inexperienced, you're still talking about people who've been in the service for 15, 18, 20 years. I don't know how much longer you need to wait before you get the experience. So from that perspective. But I think it's also important because I think we need to have a lot more mentoring between persons who've had the experience and persons who are yet to receive the experience. And in many instances, what the challenge has been is there's been no succession plan or succession plans, either within the public service or specialized areas of the public service, like the police force, for example. We've had a major challenge there because we've had significant numbers of top officers retiring almost all at the same time. And because others were not, in fact, prepared to take leadership, you have a significant gap. And so in some instances, you have to call back persons who've retired actually to stay on so that they can offer some support and mentoring. So that is also something that as a country we need to pay attention to. We don't keep a job forever. We are going to retire, we're going to move on, we're going to get interested in other things, and we need to ensure that we are constantly giving others the opportunity to get that experience so that when some of us move on, others can fill the role.
Now you mentioned, you touched the public service a little bit, but I think we can all agree that it is in need of a serious overhaul, and we have to be living under a rock not to admit that it is in need of a serious overhaul, especially where customer service, the red tape in getting things done. It sometimes takes you an entire day, and you have folks sometimes traveling, coming to Grenada, limited time and wanting to get things done at a fast pace and having it dragged on for days on end. And some of the laws that are, governing the service are somewhat outdated as well. What is your government and what are your intentions as someone coming out of, the private sector landscape and transitioning into the public sector where customer service and all of that is so very important? How has that experience been and how are we going to change, at least make an effort to change it? What are some of the plans you have there?
Right. So, well, I think I want to start first with where we're coming from, because I think you pointed out, for example, the almost dinosaur type legislation that exists in many instances. So that's one of the issues we need to tackle. But also how the public service was treated has created some of these challenges as well. And I make no bones about saying, I think the former administration really created a lot of problems by having 3-4 parallel public service running at the same time. And it may be that the intention was good in that they were trying to address the very issue of productivity, efficiency, customer service, etc. But ultimately, you have to treat employees well so that they can deliver the efficient services that you want. And I think part of the challenge has been the fact that the public service has not really been treated well. You've almost gotten to a point where the politicians and the public service were at war. And we've tried to call a truce. We've tried to say we'll address the issues that need addressing so that you in turn can deliver. So whether it's issues like addressing the pension, moving to a bi-monthly payment system, paying the teachers their dock salary, addressing the issue of regularization, which we are currently working on, addressing the issue of pension reform, because we feel you have to sort of take care of the family first so that the family can go out and then take care of the rest of the nation. So that's part of what we're addressing. The second aspect is, I agree with you, customer service in a general sense is something that I think almost the entire country has to pivot about. It is much easier to be nice to people. It is much easier to be friendly. It is much easier to try and get things done quickly. But we think part of what will drive that change is technology. A lot of the instances where human beings are given the discretion to tell you come back tomorrow, we want to be able to eliminate that discretion by giving the citizens the opportunity to be able to access a lot of the government services electronically. So whether it's paying for your driver's license, you don't need to have to go and line up. You don't need to have to go at 8 in the morning or between work hours. You can go at 2 a.m. online. You can go at 5 a.m. at line. You can do so at your own choosing. So I think a lot of the services that the public interacts with the public service for, we can put this online and make it obviously far more accessible, far more convenient, and you don't have to worry about come back tomorrow or come back the following day. So there's a significant push to do that from our tax services, licenses, etc. So that is one of the areas that we're working to try and ensure that we can get that online. And it also means the public services skill set has to change as well. So ICT will become the infrastructure really of the government to ensure that we can get better and more efficient services as well as cost savings to the taxpayers in terms of the cost of actually having to collect even the revenue that the government needs. So that's one area where we certainly think we can make a significant difference. And then the other thing is going back to the question of ensuring, I always talk about the passport office because I think it's one office that stands out, whether it's by public or private sector standards in terms of the level of dedication, the service they provide to the public, the efficiency.
Very efficient.
But that culture has to permeate throughout the public service. And I've often threatened, and I think they think I'm joking when I'm serious, to have members from the passport office begin to train other divisions of the government in customer service. Because when you go and you visit the team at the passport office, it's clear why their service is efficient. When they get in the morning, they start with their prayer, they start with the word for the day, their mission, their goal. So you are working towards something. And I think oftentimes in the public service, that doesn't happen. You just show up to work.
You just show up to work.
Or sometimes you don't, as the case may be. So there has to be leadership. There has to be vision. The workers themselves need to know what they're working towards achieving. And I think we have to sort of put that throughout all departments of the government service, which I think then makes it easier for them to understand that we're here to serve the public, despite the challenges that they face. And I'm not in any way suggesting that there aren't significant challenges from working conditions, the state of the buildings. But at the end of the day, we can't let these things prevent us from serving the public well.
Not so long ago, the Prime Minister of Jamaica also mentioned moving towards a more digital Jamaica and not having doing away with, all this paper here, paper there, even currency, and moving towards a more digital frame of mind. Because it's one thing you have to go in one place to get another, then you have to go another way to get a stamp, then go back to get another. It's really time consuming, and I think it's time that we, at least get up and, we are in the 21st century. Let's get there, and at a faster pace than
Absolutely.
where we are presently. Now, in terms of the campaign promises, and that's where you'll be graded as we go along, and folks are looking on keenly from either side. Those who support you, those who don't, they'll be looking on to see where are we, where these are some of the things that you said, some of the campaign promises you made during the last election. Can you highlight some of which your government was able to achieve and what we can look forward to?
Well, certainly. I think some of them are pretty well known. We talked about the cost of living crisis, which is still ongoing, and we took several steps to address that. So for instance, we've reduced we zero-rated VAT on several goods, and as much as 19 items are now on that list. We took the decision to cap the freight rates based on 2019 freight rates. That was something we said should be done. We did it. We didn't promise that we would repay the teachers, but in any event, we went ahead and we repaid the teachers and the public workers the dock salary. Obviously, you may almost say that the question of the pension was one of the decisive issues around the campaign. We said that this was something that we were going to do and we were going to pay, and we've paid it. And we paid it in its entirety within 6 months of coming into office. I think, there was a suggestion that if that was done, the entire economy would collapse, people would lose their jobs, and obviously none of that has happened. And I kind of want to focus on this point a little because I think, oftentimes I think the public is duped by persons into thinking that we can't achieve and we can't do things.
And if we change, everything will fall apart.
And if we change, everything will fall apart. And I'm sure people have already forgotten that the pensions were even paid. And I think part of that is to say, look, if you set a goal, you can achieve the goal. There may be times when you fall short, but at least you would have strived and you would have known where you fall short, and then you can correct and move on again. So, I highlight these because I think it's important to sort of double down on the fact that we shouldn't let people, dupe us into thinking that as a country, we can't achieve or overcome what may seem as an insurmountable or difficult task. I think there are a couple areas that I really want to spend a little time on, which is education, healthcare, and then from the public service point of view, I think there are two issues that I want to flag. One, the regularization of contract workers, and other persons who are, in a sense, in no man's land within the public service. That is something we've been working on quite a lot. We have a framework in place. We're going to start the consultations with the public service servants starting this Friday. Cabinet will be briefed on Monday, and we'll continue that process. The second aspect is that of pension reform. We have a pension reform committee in place. We have retained a consultant to design the pension scheme, and we expect that within 60 to 90 days, we will have that design that we will be able to then consult further on it. And the aim is to get into 2024 with the view of getting the pension reform going so that those workers who currently work for government but don't have a pension, actually come 2024 will be in a position where we can start that process of putting them on the pension. But we need a pension reform simply because the current status only favors one group of workers, established public servants. And you have hundreds of other workers that don't have any access to pension. And linked to that is reforms that are necessary for the national insurance scheme. Because the truth is, NS has found itself in a position where, because successive governments, and I'm not just saying the former administrations prior to them, did not take the difficult decisions or the prudent decisions to ensure that the NS fund was sustainable. So we face a situation where, in recent times, NS is actually paying out more than it is receiving. And once that happens, it's only a matter of time before you essentially go bankrupt. So we've had to take a number of reform measures, and NS itself has been speaking to the public about these. But we think it's important that as policymakers, we also start speaking to the public about this. So, for instance, the retirement age will move to 65 over a 5-year period. So it means that we will have to work 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years later over the next 5-6 years. And there are a number of other initiatives that we're taking to make sure that the fund is sound and sustainable so that 50 years from now, 60 years from now, people can still get their pension. Education. That's one of the things I'm very passionate about because I think it has made me who I am today. There are a number of things we've already started. One, we intend to amend the law to make sure that you remain in school until 18. There's no point in allowing you to leave school at 16. In the middle of no man's land. You're not an adult, you're not trained for a job, and then you basically have to spend 2 years trying to figure out what happens. And TAMCC can only take so many students. So the vast majority of our students don't get the opportunity to go to TAMCC. That's one.
So with the 2-year addition, what happens with that gap?
Right. So what we're looking to do is focus heavily on skills training and ensuring that there are other access for continuing education during that period. So, you know, maybe a not so long time ago, we used to have 6 and 7 forms in primary school. As well as even 6 and 7 forms in secondary school. But I think once National College TAMCC became dominant, you know, we went away from having the 6 and 7 forms in secondary schools. And that puts, I think, our students at a significant disadvantage. That's one. But there's also a group of students who between 10, 11, and 12 disappear as well. Those students who we say don't pass what was common entrance or CPA, who are not given the opportunity to go to secondary school. And we've taken the policy initiative that all of our students.
Now, there has been some sort of backlash with that. There are persons who are saying they don't think that would work because it means every child is not on the same level. So putting every child through secondary school, are there advantages or disadvantages to that?
Well, I'll first say, when someone says something like that, the first question I would ask is, weren't all of the kids in primary school? Weren't all of them in grade 5? Of course, you always have differences within a class. Life is different. But the idea that you should deny a child access to secondary school education because they're not all on the same level, in my view, is actually saying you don't think that each child deserves access to education. To me, education is a fundamental right. And so each child, regardless of their academic prowess, should have access to secondary school. And school is not just about the academics, right? There's sports, there's skills training, there's socializing, there's learning to deal with authority, learning to deal with your teachers, your parents. You get lifelong friendships coming out of school. And also there's a question of exposure. You know, if students don't see people from different social, academic, economic backgrounds, from different parishes, different communities, they don't learn. And so learning isn't just, in a sense, regurgitating stuff that we've been told, or what I call received wisdom. It's also developing kids' sense of curiosity. You know, and so to me, we have to appreciate. And that's why I'm making the point. The kids who don't go to secondary school, who drop out of school when they're 11 or 12, what life are you condemning them to? And I think the statistics will show you they are the ones who are more likely to end up in crime, drugs, mental health issues, etc. The stigma
continue
and so
the
on.
cycle of poverty.
And continue the cycle of poverty. And the data is clear. The poorest group of people are always young people, between 14 and 25. And oftentimes it's because between that age, they don't have access to education. So to me, it's not even something to debate if we want to truly get to the point of start addressing some of the poverty situations that we have in Grenada. And so skill centers, it's one of the things we talked a lot about.
Now, will those skill centers be added to the school system, the hours that they attend school? Because we have to admit, of course, that not every child is academically inclined. Not every child will become in the first 20 or the first 30, or regardless how many students are in the classroom. There are some you don't want them to fall behind and think, you know, okay, I'm just here, but I'm not really making a difference. Will those skills set and the skill centers and training, will that be incorporated? Will we see a revamping of our system as we know it?
Yes, so the Ministry of Education has actually been working on a comprehensive policy to address the issue of the skills training divide, and in many instances it's just total absence of it. So it's not going to be a one shoes fit all type approach. In some instances, starting even at the primary school level, for example, a pilot was recently launched at the Woburn School, where the school itself, you'd have the skills training like carpentry and so on at the school. But we're also looking at having dedicated centers of excellence throughout particularly the rural communities. So for example, in St. Andrew, we've already identified potentially 2 buildings that can serve as skills training centers. And we don't intend to reinvent the wheel. You know, there are some institutions that have already been playing a significant role, and I always highlight for the significant work that they've done in that aspect. And so we intend to collaborate with them so that we can have more centers. And it doesn't have to be a new center per se, as long as it is focused on skills training. And what we want to do is really create centers of excellence. So you may find some would focus perhaps on carpentry only, or masonry only, or electrical engineering only, or plumbing, or a combination of all three. Because when you speak to many of the folks in the construction industry, there is a significant lack of skilled tradesmen in Grenada, and that's because the education system does not produce them, right? I always use this example. If you want to go in the construction industry, you probably either dropped out to secondary school or you finish secondary school, you just don't have a job. So you go, and they offer you a laborer job, which is unskilled. You don't carry sand, carry cement, etc. And over time, you would have to have that drive to literally train yourself or mentor yourself, right? But there isn't many formal places where you can go and actually learn. And then with the use of technology as well, we have to combine that to really create even more skilled persons. I mean, we struggle to get tilers, painters, air conditioning, refrigeration technician. We have elevators in Grenada. We import people to service them, So, look, the marine sector, right? I mean, that's another area that's untouched. So there's no question that there's significant opportunities if we focus on skills training. And I think we also have to stop what I call the sort of intellectual arrogance of clearly suggesting that people who are academically inclined or the traditional professions are somehow brighter or more intellectual than people who are skilled, more skilled inclined. So I think that is part of why sometimes children and even parents are not drawn towards the skills, because obviously the glory, and the praise,
and to push a lot towards okay, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, and the other jobs seem to be like okay, it's nothing. But I was speaking to someone who was actually involved in it, and when they gave me a breakdown of how much they actually made, I was like, I'm seriously in the wrong profession.
No, absolutely.
And they make way more than the job that you're touted with the tie and look good every day. They seriously make a lot of money. But we don't seem to gravitate towards those for whatever reason. So how do we get students, from within the school to understand, hey, there's a million other jobs that you can, million other careers that you can engage in?
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things. It requires buy-in from parents. So in a sense, I think, at a policy level, the Ministry of Education, the Grenada National Training Agency, all stakeholders, the Chamber of Commerce, the business community in particular has to become, I think, a lot more vocal for saying what are the skill sets that we need, and letting people know the kind of income that you can get, and then also giving it some applause, some pomp, so that people recognize that we need plumbers, we need carpenters, we need electricians, etc., and making sure that they too take the pride of place in society that lawyers and doctors traditionally might have occupied. So I think that's one of the things we need, because if you don't have buy-in from parents, they will obviously continue pushing their children to go this academic route, and that is something. But I think structurally as well, if we have the access to the skills training centers and so on, and they're everywhere, and kids know that they have access to it, then it becomes easier for them to gravitate and say, look, I'm happy being a plumber, I'm happy being a tiler, I'm happy being a boat captain or someone who works in the marine industry. And I think that is part of what we have to address as well.
Now, I want to stick a little bit on the issue of youth, because, like you rightly said not so long ago, our population is a youthful one. There's more young people in the public service as well as in the private than anything else. So youth development and unemployment are major areas of concern, How is your government tackling this issue, and also that of the Mani program? I mean, it has its many benefits, but how are you tackling it at this present time?
All right. Well, in a number of ways, and I want to start with the Mani program. Now, one of the things, the Mani program was conceived as a training program, almost as apprenticeship, with the view that ultimately it will fast track you into getting regularized, normal employment, first within the private sector and then within the government service. Unfortunately, there's been significant abuse of the program where even within the private service, the young persons have been exploited, and the government has become a supplier of cheap labor. In some instances, even paying people beneath the minimum wages and supplying this cheap labor to the private sector.
True.
One of the things we've said is that has to stop. If any Mani trainee comes to a private sector place and they've been trained, you either have to hire them or you let them go. You cannot continue paying them substandard wages that they cannot live on and exploiting their labor. And I think members of the private sector have gotten that message, because we have instances now where people are actually hiring them properly. So that is something from a policy point of view we have made clear and we will intend to enforce. That also applies to the government. If you take workers as Imanis and you've trained them and the job is available and they need to do the job, we need to get them onto the normal regularized workforce. And that is part of the regularization process that I've spoken about that we intend to address over the next 6 months. Because we cannot have people working and when they're ready to go home, a colleague has to take $10 out of their pocket to give them to pay the bus to go home. So that's one of the areas. The second area is this whole question of education as well. And part of the reason for moving the age to 18 is to address this. Because you see, what is happening is that when you get out of school at 16 and you don't have a job, what was created is this Imani program. And then you train, and then you go from 16 to 26. That's a decade. And you're Imani. And then you probably have a child, etc., etc., etc. And you know what comes with that. And then you're stuck in this trap. So you were not actually given the kind of education that would make you function in the real world. And that's part of the challenge. The other thing we want to focus on, particularly, I think that's important, is young women in business, in entrepreneurship, because oftentimes they're the ones who are, in a sense, placed in this trap position and this dependency position. And so you see we focus a lot on small businesses, on giving people the opportunity, for example, with the CES program, to start their business or to expand their business. So we're very, very keen to support the cottage industry, agro-processing, or anyone, frankly, who wants to get into some sort of self-employment. Because that gives you the economic independence, that gives you the ability to hire others and to grow your business. So small business support in the form of grant funding or concessionary loans, those sort of things are very crucial as well. And it has to be specific and in many instances, in a sense, gender focused, to make sure that we target young women in particular, because we still find that the data shows that women are underpaid when compared to men, and significantly more vulnerable, obviously, because they're the ones who look after the family and oftentimes have to give up employment to look after kids or take jobs that they otherwise would not want to take, simply because they need to be home to continue looking after kids and taking care of the family. So economic policies that are specifically targeted towards young women is also one of the key things to addressing that.
You know, one of the concerns I have as well is that there are a number of these programs, and oftentimes you'll speak to different people and I don't know anything about that. I've never heard about that. So I think from a government perspective, whatever ministry is responsible should be more aggressive in disseminating the information that these are available. These grants are available for you to take advantage of. Because many times they'll say, we don't know, we've never heard of it, we don't know what to do. So maybe more programs, because it takes the burden off the government. If people are able to feed themselves and they're able to be self-employed, start their own businesses, it takes the pressure off the government. So I think we need more in terms of information-wise. That is something that is lacking a lot, information, whether we do use radio programs, whatever it is, but let people know what...
That we've been fighting. I'm saying fighting because literally that's what I feel sometimes. It's the government should be going to the people, not the other way around. And in many instances, you're right. A lot of the programs, people just don't know about it. What means we use to circulate the information is not reaching them. So it's something that we have to do a significantly better job at. And I think programs like yours, particularly if we're targeting young women in particular, or women for that matter, are some of the avenues that we certainly have to use. But that's part of the reason, for example, why we do a lot of town hall type engagements, because we found not just having a town hall, but then we can bring some of these very said government programs and initiatives, have them have booths, flyers, leaflets that they can take data information from people, so that people actually are made aware of some of these programs. But we recognize that that's a challenge, and it's something that we definitely have to get better at.
Now, talking about getting better, this one may not be a popular question amongst my listeners, but I can't help but notice, and I did a little research regarding our youth and alcohol consumption, and Grenada does not sit pretty in the rest of the world where that is concerned. They say, according to a report that I saw some time ago, they say that the average daily intake of alcohol in Grenada is 40.4 grams of pure alcohol. The average intake worldwide is average daily 33 grams. So Grenada's average is higher than the world's average intake. And with alcohol consumption, we've been speaking about rehabilitation, Carlton Home, for quite a number of years. We're yet to see it. And oftentimes, just going through town, you see so many young people on the street. How are we addressing that?
Right, so that's a big challenge, and it requires a health,
and VAT alone
culture, education. No, VAT alone is not going to do it at all. The truth is, we abuse alcohol too much in Grenada, and it has significant health consequences, physically and mentally for the population. And I think the significant rates of things like diabetes and people needing dialysis and so on is partly as a result of that, and it leads to amputations, low productivity, other persons now having to spend the time helping out family members. It's a major, major challenge across the board. From where I sit, I think there are a number of things. One, we glorify alcohol consumption. Actually, we glorify the abuse of alcohol consumption, whether it's in our music, whether it's in or videos, whether it's literature, whether it's advertising. And I think we have to have a national conversation about this. For my part, I don't think there should be alcohol advertising. I actually think it should not be advertised. And I think that's one way of starting to address how you deal with it. Now, I know this may sound controversial, and those who are in that business obviously may disagree, and I understand because it's their business. But I don't think, for example, at prime time, when you're watching news, you should be advertising alcohol because you want kids to sit and look at the news with adults, and what they see is an ad glorifying the consumption of alcohol. Clearly, also, in my view, there should be tighter regulation on access to alcohol for young people, especially hard alcohol. There's a significant difference between a beer and a 40% rum or vodka or all the other stuff that goes with it. And I think just the need to be more responsible in terms of the amount of alcohol that we consume, particularly on any one particular occasion, because I think that's part of the problem. We drink till we completely drunk, as opposed to simply having a drink socially. Which is enjoyable. So I think that is part of what has to happen. It's going to take a long time, but I think culturally we have to man up and say it is not good for us to be consuming. It might be good for us to be producing and exporting, but I don't know that it's good for us to be consuming the large volumes of alcohol that we're consuming. And I think that is something that all of us have to have an honest conversation about and be prepared to tackle. The other thing that we can do is from a regulation point of view. I mean, we consume alcohol openly everywhere. Anywhere.
Imagine United Big States of America, you cannot consume alcohol publicly.
Right. And I think
liquor stores are closed on Sundays.
Yeah. And I think that's something we also have to address. In my mind, if you have a bar, people should drink in your bar. They should not be walking off and walking up and down the streets, consuming alcohol up and down the street, especially in public places where children and so on are. But we don't even have the discipline, for example, track and sport meet and so on, to not sell alcohol. We sell it, and that's part of the challenge. So in a sense, from a very early age, you learn culturally that it is just part and parcel of the fabric of our culture. So I think that is something that we have to address because it has significant health consequences for the population and for many of the persons who abuse it. So that is something that I think we need to address. And as you say, you can have a good time without getting drunk or without abusing alcohol. And I think that is something that we also have to be able to preach. And also, I think from a young person's perspective, we have to diversify what we view as entertainment. Right? It can't just be partying and drinking. And I think that's where, to some extent, we do let our young people down. Because as a country, we have not, in my view, developed alternatives in terms of entertainment. Theme parks, places that young people can go to socialize or to even have fun that allows them to learn.
And that's where you come in.
Exactly. So that's part of what we have to work on in terms of when we build communities and build villages, that we encourage both the private sector and the government to invest in things like that. I mean, we don't even have things like bicycle tracks. If you wanted to ride a bike, you have to run the risk of riding it in the road, and how risky that is. So I think just engaging in more wholesome activities, especially when you're young, are some of the things we need to promote. Using the ocean. Not many Grenadians scuba dive, not many Grenadians dive. Period. Except perhaps fishermen and so on. So I think we have to break the cycle of what is normal. A lot of our people can't swim. So just getting the population swimming, for example, then opens up an entire new world to people. And I think those are some of the things that we have to work on in a very deliberate and consistent manner so that we have alternatives. I think going back to a lot of the grassroots sports at a community level, we need to have a lot more of that. We have, for example, we play a lot of wind ball cricket now under the lights. But if you go there, you'd see the amount of alcohol that's consumed. Because again, it's turned into an purely sort of entertainment, as opposed to necessarily being a healthy, more family-oriented thing. And I think those are some of the things we can address. We have the technology, we have lights now. So one of the things I'm a big proponent on is making sure that we have school competitions that take place at night, so that parents and families can come out and support their kids. So we don't need to play the cricket at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day when there's no one watching. We can do it under the lights. We can play the football under the lights so that families can come out, friends, villagers can come out and just engage in more wholesome activity than, in a sense, leaving young people up to their own devices, where invariably the risk is that they may turn to things like alcohol or so to, frankly, sometimes numb their boredom.
So what do we do in terms of the rehabilitation, drug addiction, alcohol addiction? Where are we headed with that?
Right. So, I mean, the government did pledge a small sum of $500,000 to start addressing the issue of the Carlton Center rehabilitation issue. I think the challenge is, and there's the private sector as well, led by Grenada Cooperative Bank and a number of other insurance companies who've also been raising funds for it. I think we are looking at whether the site is suitable in the context that obviously an entire new building has to be built, but the site is very close to the main road. And potentially also very close to supermarkets and shops and so on. So I think the security of the site is one of the things that we have to decide upon, bearing in mind the
It has to be
constraints
somewhere
we
you
have.
don't have any temptation.
Right. So that is one of the issues. It does require, in a sense, some further consultations and a policy decision on it. But we are committed to supporting a rehabilitation center. And again, it doesn't have to be purely government alone. We are happy to work with partners. As we said, some of the private sector firms have been raising funds earmarked specifically for the Carlton home. And in fairness to them, which I agree with, they've indicated they wouldn't release it to the government unless they have the assurance that the government itself is committed to doing this. But we are committed to doing it. I think we just have to settle on, if the site is not suitable, finding an alternative site, getting the designs done, and proceeding with building the center. I just want to touch, on one aspect, which is our psychiatric hospital, which I think we all have to accept is not what it should be. And that is also something that the Ministry of Health is looking at as well, because we appreciate mental illness or mental ill health is just like any other
form of
illness. And the stigmatization and so on that comes with that is something that we will have to spend a lot of time making sure that we unlearn that behavior. But the facilities themselves, as I think we all know, there are significant stories of horror coming out there, and it's something that also we have to begin to address. But it starts with education, because a lot of it is driven either by ignorance or fear, sometimes even downright superstition, in terms of the way we treat people who are mentally ill. And that is part of the challenge we face because of the difficulty. But it is something that the Ministry of Health is acutely aware of. It is working on new legislation, and it has been beefing up the human resource capacity to start addressing mental health.
Now, not so long ago, you mentioned the issue of getting private sector involved, in, of course, investing in events for youth and programs for youth and what have you. Now, we all hear about the CBI program. It's all over. You hear it. You're so in glowing terms. Sometimes you hear the negatives. You hear, and for the most part, from according to who you hear it from, it seems like it's not a good thing. From your perspective, as somebody who's been involved, how do we get persons who are interested in investing in Grenada and using that program to do other things apart from the hotels, from doing other things apart from the concrete? Because there are many other things, areas that can be invested in, but you don't seem to see those materializing. How do we target those?
Yeah. Well, I think the problem has been, in a sense, the government itself has not had a policy of encouraging investment in areas outside of hotel, real estate, tourism type development. So I think the onus is really now on us to approach private sector developers specifically for areas outside of the tourism development or real estate development, and basically say to them, this is where we want the focus to be. And we think there are opportunities for doing so. We need a new hospital. We certainly need more skills training centers. We need to certainly develop our marine industry, the creative economy. And we had a symposium addressing that. So we think the leadership has to come from us, now that we're in office, to say those are the areas that we want our CBI development type projects to focus on, and these are the projects that we will be approving, or at least giving more deliberate attention to approve, rather than just a continuation of the hotel, tourism, property development type projects. So that's one area where we need to do that. The second area is obviously the government itself has a national transformation fund where persons can acquire the citizenship by paying directly into that fund. So I think we also have to earmark the funds out of the National Transformation Fund for specific projects that are not tourism or property development related. And we're well on our way to doing that. We've created a board, a transformation board that will provide guidance to the government as to specific areas where we should target the investment of the funds. And I'm pretty sure it will not be in the usual real estate property development, because we do recognize the need, for example, to support the creative economy, which is one area that I think we are very passionate about, because we feel, again, going back to young people, it's an opportunity for them to earn income in a vast area without necessarily having to leave Grenada. So that's one area that we certainly intend to focus on. The other aspect is that of the environment and being able to build resistance to disasters and shocks and so on. And so we've set up a fund to ensure that there's actual money being set aside, so that we can bounce back from any natural disaster or any man-made disaster or any health-related related disaster, rather than simply saying we have to wait for someone to help us. So that's one area as well that we are looking to target. But I think agriculture and agro-processing and food security also is another major area that is important for us. And I think a lot of people are interested in it. A lot of young people are interested in it. But again, you have to have access to the technology, access to land, access to water, and a government policy that supports and backs that. So that's one of the areas where I certainly think funds from the CBI could deliberately be targeted to address that area as well. So it is a work in progress, because when we got into office, there were some issues in terms of the backlog of applicants, there not being leadership at the CBI unit because we had an interim CEO, etc. We've worked on addressing those issues. We're working on the backlog, and I think that then allows us to then focus more on how we use the funds to be able to address some of the areas that I've talked about.
You've been out of state on a few engagements, even as far as Dubai. What are some of the tangible outcomes from those derived from those trips?
All right. Well, one tangible one is actually today at 1 p.m. we are meeting with the Tony Blair NGO, which basically is an NGO set up by the former Prime Minister of the UK, Tony Blair, which basically goes about helping governments address some of the issues we talked about in terms of actually getting things done, in terms of fixing the public service and so on. So I met with Mr. Blair, I met with his wife. We had a long discussion lasting about an hour as to his experience as a prime minister in a much more developed country with a much larger bureaucracy, and what are the challenges he faced in terms of being effective. And arising from that conversation, I invited him to have some of his team visit us. One arrived on Sunday, one arrived yesterday, and we beginning the engagements with them today to really look at how we actually address this whole question of customer service, the whole question of implementation, the whole question of efficiency. Because we have no illusion that if we don't address those things, we will not be able to deliver on behalf of the Grenadian public. So they're here for the next couple of days. And so coming out of that, we would expect that we would then be better placed to allow us to be more efficient in terms of what it is we're trying to do within the public service. Part of the trip was really to market our CBI program, because we have not actually marketed the program, as in the government of Grenada. What has happened is that you've had industry players doing their marketing, which we've kind of loafed off. But the danger with that is that people may say or do things that we don't approve of. And so we wanted to make sure that we had our own deliberate voice, and that people recognize that the government is the official source of information on our CBI. But crucially, by having this program, we've created a large Grenadian diaspora of significantly wealthy and sometimes successful persons in all fields of life. And we are not tapping into them. And they want to contribute. They're citizens of Grenada. They want to be part and parcel of the development in Grenada. And so what we sought to do was to engage with many of them so that we can get them to actually start paying interest and investing in Grenada. So one of the things we're working on is that we're hoping that in November, which is around the time that the Range 6 Sense Hotel in Lassages is started to open, that we can have an international business forum in Grenada where we actually get Grenadian businessmen to link and partner with some of our CBI investors so that we can look and see that how we can get synergies to really allow us to create business opportunities for Grenadians. One of the...
Would it be something similar to the creative, what we had not so long ago?
Yes. Okay. But one of the things we're trying to really do is get to a point where we can create a more export-driven economy. Now, when I was growing up, Grenada exported a lot, whether it's bananas, cocoa, nutmegs. The reverse is happening. But we could just take the tea industry, for example. Grenada has some of the most exotic spices, some of the most exotic fruits, right? And you take a place like China, which has a population of over 1 billion, where tea drinking is revered.
It's like water.
Right. But we don't export a single tea bag to China. And it's not because there aren't opportunities. The opportunities are there. It's just that we are not looking that way.
So that's why you mentioned the whole investing in other areas apart from hotels.
Apart from, precisely.
When you travel, I'm seeing soursop leaves in health food stores, and I'm looking to see where they're made from and where they came from. And you see so many things. You're seeing breadfruit flour. You're seeing so many things that we literally have here. Yeah. And we put it in, but we're not shipping anything out.
Right.
So our import bill is...
Right. And that's one of the key things that we have to refocus our economy on, is that we have the raw materials. We need to ensure we invest in research and development. We need to ensure that we support our agro-processors. I mean, Daylight Grenada Industries, which is probably one of our, owned by the Governor General. And I think, it's a perfect example. Started as a home cottage industry, received government support, believe it or not, in the days of George Brizan. And the Governor General was, in fact, I think recently showing me photographs of when, her mom, the opening of the factory, which was then done by George Brizan and the mom with funding from the Europeans. And today it has stood the test of time. It's testimony to, female entrepreneurship. It's testimony to the importance of agro-processing, and it's testimony to having an export-led type economic development. Because at the end of the day, once you scale, there's only so much we can consume in Grenada, and you have to find markets elsewhere. So I think that is part of what we need to be able to do when we address some of those things. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on the issue of renewable energy. Because that's a major, I think, issue that we have to address in Grenada. And so part of the traveling was also looking at how we look at investors who are interested in that aspect of our development. Because if you are going to have large solar farms, you have to find the money to do them. If you're going to do wind farms, you have to find the money to do them. And it doesn't necessarily mean the government has to do so. We certainly have to create the bankable projects that we can get people to invest in. So Grenlec is working on some sites, large sites for solar renewable at the airport, at Pearls, and in Seamoon. PT Martinique and Carrick, we want to make 100% renewable. And we are going to use the tragedy of the fire at the Grenlec plant to really spur our ambitions to make sure that we can get Carrick to a place where using renewable energies first, and the burning of diesel is only a backup. So that's part of what we looked at as well.
Somebody is throwing a question, and I think we've been hearing a lot of talk about it, the whole Canada program for Grenadians. There's a lot of...
Yes.
Tell us about that.
All right, so the Canadian government would have been reviewing, well, I should back up by saying, obviously, I think most of the OECS and many CARICOM countries, regrettably, over the last 20 years, have found themselves going from visa-free, in the case of Grenada, to having to have a visa. And that was imposed about 15 to 18 years ago. And it's compounded by the fact that you have to do biometrics and you have to travel to Trinidad to get your biometrics done. So obviously, it becomes a lot more expensive to even get a Canadian visa. And so there's been significant lobbying over the years to have the visa waiver, the visa requirements that were imposed lifted or waived. By the time we got into office, the Canadian government had already conducted a review of the process. And when we met with Prime Minister Trudeau in the Bahamas earlier this year, he had announced that in the coming weeks, the Canadian government will indicate what its position is. In the case of Grenada and Dominica, what the Canadian government did was to have decided that they was not going to lift the visa requirement, but they will all give us electronic travel authorization, which is the other option where you, in fact, you don't apply for a visa, but you apply for a permission ahead of your travel online. And if approved, then you can travel without the need to get a visa. They kept the visa requirement, which means we still have to do the biometrics, but they created what is called the Canada Plus program, which says that if you already have a US visa, or if you in the past had a Canadian visa, that you would be entitled to obviously enter Canada easier. Now, I know people have been speculating as to whether this is linked to a CBI program and so on. The answer is no. In fact, many of the other countries that have come off the visa waiver, the visa requirement list, do also have CBI programs. I cannot give you the specific reason why Grenada was not lifted. All I can say is that certainly our administration will continue working with our Canadian partners to get us to the point where Grenadians no longer require a visa to get to Canada. The Canadian authorities have committed to having more frequent visits to Grenada so that Grenadians' biometrics can be taken without us having to get on a plane and go to Trinidad or to St. Vincent to get it done. But yes, it obviously is disappointing, and it is something that we will continue working on.
Okay. I need at least 2 hours to sit and have conversations with you, and time never seems to be enough. But my Rastafarian brothers will not be happy with me if I did not raise the question of something that we campaigned on.
Yes.
And I say we meaning your government. So tell us, your political party then, the issue of marijuana. Where are we now? Where is the conversation leading now?
Right. So we had created a marijuana commission to treat with, in a sense, developing the overall policy framework on the question of the legalization of marijuana. So I'll be honest and say I'm not satisfied that we've moved with sufficient urgency on the issue. And I think recognizing that, I think we've gotten to the point where the Ministry of Agriculture and Lands under the portfolio that the Commission was set up with. I think in order to have movement on the issue, we'll probably take a two-pronged approach where we do look at decriminalizing first and then moving to full legalization. And I think we recognize that we have obviously a bit of a tension now. And I'll give an example. From time to time, the Rastafarian community would want to have an education program on marijuana or a public forum, and they want to have a marijuana plant, for example, a display, and they have to write every time and ask for permission, right? And then we are saying we want to legalize marijuana, and so you have this sort of inconsistency and this tension. So that is one of the things that we recognize, that even culturally, because from a law enforcement point of view, it's still completely illegal. And so the question is, if a police officer saw you with a marijuana plant, you'd be entitled to arrest you. So we recognize there has to be a transition phase where we begin to do away with those limitations, where we begin to decriminalize, and that we put the necessary legislation in place and also have the unlearning of behavior. and the learning of new behaviors, so we can start to address that aspect of it. But the larger legalization and the economic benefits from it requires some work. But we are committed to staying the course. We are committed to doing it because we really do think that there are significant economic benefits to be derived, economic and medicinal, from the legalization of marijuana. And then also the stigmatization that has gone on for several years, and in a sense the dehumanization often of Rastafarians because of this issue is something that we also have to address culturally. So one of the things I'm keen to ensure is that when we get to the process of legalization, that the Rastafarian community is actually given preferential treatment in terms of how we treat with this issue, because I know the risk is you could have significant persons with the funding to come in and to buy plants and to grow and plant and create, and then you end up with the same marginalization of the persons who, for the last 100 years, have advocated and fought to get us to where we are today.
Okay, well, we almost out of time, but do I have permission to get a couple more minutes?
Yes, a couple more minutes.
Okay. Now, another one of the things that, and this is more of a personal nature, in terms of who knew you before getting into politics, when you as this calm, humble, quiet, unassuming person.
I think I'm still like that.
Yes, but now that we are here, and a lot of the times what you have is people get into politics, and of course you make decisions that, you want to endear the populace. You want people to be, comfortable and, ensure that you get voted into office the next time around. Now, there are some unpopular decisions that you may have to make that may not sit well with even those who voted for you. Are you prepared to make those hard and fast decisions to bring Grenada buying into the whole transformational agenda that may not be popular, but long term it will be beneficial? And one of those is, it literally grieves me every day whenever I pass on that carnage to see those boats on the way blowing in the breeze on our beautiful carnage, where you will not find in any other part of the world, and it just seems so underdeveloped, and we could do so much more with it. In terms of taking big and huge steps, what are we prepared to do to boost the tourism product? Because we can't come to Grenada every day to see the little monkey up in Granite Time.
So
to go on, there's beaches practically around the Caribbean. Yes.
No, so well, I think one of the things that I don't think I'm interested in is being in power forever. And at the end of the day, you have to live in Grenada, and you want to live in a country that is improving, that is getting better, where the quality of life improves for the vast majority of persons. So certainly, from my perspective, I'm prepared to take decisions once I know we spend sufficient time explaining the rationale for the decision, having the consultations, taking decisions that may not be popular, because it's not everything that's popular that is good. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, the answer is yes. I'm actually not worried about whether or not I'm returned to office, and I know every time I tell people that, they probably get upset with me. But I think I didn't campaign on being a politician as usual. We campaign on saying we should act in the best interest of the majority of the people most of the times. And yes, there might be tensions as to who determines what's in the best interest of the people, and it has to be the people. And they get a chance to do that by voting you in or voting you out, every 4 or 5 years, as the case may be. But there's a question of the carnage, and I think the bigger issue of the tongue of St. George. There is no question that the tongue of St. George needs significant investing and needs significant reimagination. And the carnage is just one part of it. But we actually have to save the carnage. And I recently talked about the fact that we are negotiating with the Saudi Arabian government to receive $100 million, which we hope most of it will be grant funding, but some of it may be concessionary loan, to address areas like the carnage. Because the truth is, we run the risk of actually losing the carnage because of increasing sea level rise. And so the first thing we have to do is actually save it. And by saving it, it will actually involve a reimagining of the carnage and a rebuilding of the carnage and many of the parts of the tongue of St. George, because it will go under sea level if we don't address it. The same applies to places like Grandlands Beach. The same applies to places like Grenville and so on. We actually have to save and take dramatic action to save those areas, or the projections. Certainly the satellite imagery shows that between 2030 and 2050, which is not a long time, which is in our lifetime, you could have the entire carnage underwater. Oh, wow. Right? And Grandlands Beach itself, the entire beach underwater. And people may think this is far-fetched, but it's not. If you walk the coast of St. Andrew, which I did a month ago, the entire St. Andrew coast, from Pearls all the way up to Battery, save for Battery, is underwater. There's no beach. The sea comes right up to the land. So all you have is sargassum. So the entire coast has disappeared. And if you look at Soubise and Marquis, the same thing is happening. You add the sargassum, you basically have the road, very little land, very little beach. and water. So the challenge we face is that, the areas that we love are significantly under threat. So it is not just saving the architecture, revamping and reimagining the tongue of St. George and the Carnage in particular, and dealing with the issue of the boats, which are there, but it's actually saving the entire thing by taking decisive action and getting the funding to actually save it. So that's part of what we're working on to get the funding. A lot of work was done, and I'm open to give credit where credit is due, in fact, by a number of persons in the former administration to address this climate smart issue, which we now call climate infrastructure resilience, because that's really the key to it. But I agree with you. The Carnage has the capacity, even without doing that major type of infrastructure work that we talk about, with simple low-hanging fruits, to be transformed into a beautiful, pedestrian-friendly area. And I think it does require us to have the hard conversations with the boat owners, with the owners of properties along the Carnage, because I don't think the use, cement depot, etc., is compatible with, I think, how we would really like to see it. So that's part of what we need to do. And there's simple things we can do. Boardwalks, walkway, electric bikes, putting a lot more greenery in, beautifying it, having a painting scheme where the buildings are painted a certain way. Those are simple things we can do. And I mean, you can go to places like Aruba and so on, and you see it quite easily. So, but it will require a sense of community, a sense of purpose, where the persons who live in the tongue of St. George, on the Carnage, the business owners and so on, are prepared to work along with the government to get something like that done. And advocacy, because obviously people like you are advocating for it, then we certainly would have allies that we can help, in that regard.
I think I have two more we can go. You've spoken about the need for the diaspora, of course, to be more involved in the development of Grenada. And one must admit, in recent times, there seems to be a resurgence of energy from the diaspora. They are now speaking up louder than before. They were sort of quiet, but now they're definitely wanting to be part of, the transformational agenda. What steps will you take to achieve this, getting them more involved in it?
Well, I can tell you, we've already taken steps to achieve this. So, for instance, many persons may not know, but that is something we intend to highlight. Many of our statutory boards have directors who are diaspora based, and I can rattle off several of them. You can even from gravel and concrete to the Transport Commission, where basically some of the persons who serve on the boards are actually in the diaspora. Right, so they don't actually physically come here. So that's one of the things we wanted to do very early, was to give them an opportunity to partake in the decision-making process when it comes to many of the statutory bodies that we have in Grenada. And that's been working well from places like the National Insurance Scheme. We have persons who are in the diaspora based on it. Or Grenadians who live both in Grenada and outside of Grenada, perhaps spend the time, they're also serving on many of the boards. So that's one area where we've immediately, I think, seen an improvement in terms of direct diaspora involvement in decision-making process and in policy making. The second thing that we've done is two young women, Grenadians in New York, volunteered their time to create the Grenada Diaspora Advisory Council. So basically what they've sought to do is give administrative support to creating this entity, which is officially sanctioned by Cabinet and by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where they create a database of every and any Grenadian who wishes to share the database with them, and we categorize them based on profession. And the aim here, the diaspora obviously sends a lot of remittances, sends the barrels, sends the material things, and so on. And I think sometimes they feel that that's all we're interested in. And we don't reciprocate in terms of the ideas, in terms of the experience, in terms of the know-how, in terms of the connections. So one of the things we really wanted to do, and that's why it's called an advisory council, is actually leverage that. So they've been working with us on a lot of the more big policy type issues that we need to address in Grenada. And I'll give an example as well, but even on a more basic level. One of the things we're working with is to get a Grenada brigade of healthcare medical professionals on an ongoing basis who can come to Grenada on a rotating basis to help beef up our healthcare on the island, whether it's in terms of just general practice, or whether it's in terms of specialist areas, or whether it's in terms of providing doctors who can do surgery. So that's one of the things that they're working on, because we have, for example, the Palestinian brigade, which came to Grenada a couple of weeks ago. We have the Cuban brigade, which is here. And so the question is, why are we not leveraging and using our own Grenadian diaspora brigade to help us? And there are several hundreds of Grenadians in the diaspora who are very successful in the medical field. So that's one of the things that we're working on as well. But from a cultural perspective as well, One of the things we recognize is that, on many of our major events, whether it's Carnival, whether it's Christmas time, whether it's Easter time, the diaspora not only have its own events in the diaspora, but oftentimes come home for those events. And so we want to make sure that we have events also that specifically focus on them. And we have the 50th anniversary of independence coming up. And that is one area that we certainly want to have diaspora-specific events. And I think I'm using this opportunity to invite all of the diaspora to come home for the 50th anniversary. We're going to have a diaspora homecoming event where persons can really come and enjoy Grenada, but also showcase the remarkable success of many Grenadians within the diaspora. And then finally, from an investment point of view, because oftentimes as a government we go looking for investment and we never looked at the diaspora. We look all over the place, right? We look at everybody else except the diaspora, and we think there are some specific areas that I think the diaspora can help with: housing and healthcare, the 2H, because I know one feeds off the other. Many Grenadians are very reluctant to come back home because of the state of the healthcare, and many of them are also reluctant to come back home because they can't find a house, right? But they can help us solve the problem, because we think from an investment point of view, the diaspora itself could invest in creating housing that is suitable for the diaspora itself.
So that was my final question, so I could ask another one, since you're sort of segueing into that of the housing needs. It is the housing needs is great, and it's definitely great, and there never seem to be enough funds based on the reports to adequately meet the needs of our people. So how is your government going to address that?
Right. So we campaign on building 500 Grenadian-style homes. But the truth is, the problem, as you said, is the magnitude of the problem is far more significant than this. So we have to take a very systematic approach and, in a sense, multi-pronged approach to addressing the housing needs of Grenada. So currently we had, for instance, the affordable homes built by the Chinese government, which we are very grateful for. But what we found upon the homes is that they were essentially shells. Well built, lovely bathrooms and so on, quite modern glass fixtures, etc. But there were no cabinets, no kitchen counters, no closets. So we have actually delayed the distribution of the homes for that reason. And as part of the budget for 2023, we in fact had an allocation so that we can in fact have the cupboards, the kitchens, etc. put in. We believe by the end of June, give or take, that process should be completed. Now, one of the things we're trying to do is really to encourage home ownership and to get people to be responsible. So we've had some debate within the government as to how we treat with homes. And my view is that we should in fact give, and I'm saying give here, sell the homes to people so that people own it, even as an apartment. And that would bring about a culture change. We are not used to condos or condominiums or apartment ownership, but the law exists actually in Grenada. It was passed to create timeshares, to create condominiums, etc. So they can be sold. So while the government may retain ownership of the land, the apartment is yours. You can will it in your will to your daughter, to your son. You can mortgage it to a bank, to gaze, precisely. Right? So the aim here really would be obviously to have it heavily subsidized in terms of the cost, but to give people the opportunity to own things and to become proud of it. That's one aspect. The second aspect is the housing authority. We are going to significantly beef up the housing authority's ability to deliver homes because we recognize that has to happen. And we have to create communities. Part of the challenge is that there's been no planned housing development in Grenada for Grenadians. And so you're left on your own to just go and fend and build every and anywhere. And it oftentimes means the infrastructure, the roads are not available, or it takes a very long time. You then have to pay Grenlex sometimes to bring the pole to your home. So it makes everything more expensive. What we are trying to do is identify lands where we can build clusters of homes and create communities so that it reduces the cost of construction, it reduces the cost of the infrastructure, and that you can then sell the homes at an affordable price. And we want to do so with the private sector, right? Because in some instances, the government may be able to provide land. In some instances, it may be able to provide the infrastructure. And in some instances, or perhaps all instances, we will have to provide a fiscal concessionary package that would allow for the development to take place to keep the price and the cost of the homes affordable.
Would that be done in tandem with the housing authority?
No, absolutely. So the housing authority would be one of the instruments that we would use to do so. But we also want to have separate partnerships with members of the private sector, particularly construction firms and persons who own land, to be able to bring that development to fruition. And lastly, because I think the diaspora is important here, we've had significant support from the diaspora in that regard, particularly to using new concepts of building, new age materials. Because that's one of the things we have to factor in. We live in a hurricane belt, and we can't build plywood homes and expect they will survive. You have to deal with rain, you have to deal with termites. We live in a tropical area, and then you have to deal with the hurricane. So just being able to reimagine the use of space. So we need architects who are exciting. We need engineers who are exciting. I will give one of them, Mr. Julian Mitchell, well known, who spent a lot of his time looking at the cost of construction in Grenada, looking at creative ways that we can look to address this issue. And so I expect in the not too distant future that the Minister of Housing will be announcing a housing committee and how we plan to roll out to address those issues. But it's something I'm very excited about because, again, I think it's an opportunity for economic development. It's an opportunity for us to train a lot of the young people in skills that are required to construct.
How soon are we looking at doing that?
Well, I'd expect probably within a month or so that he will announce who the committee members are and what are some of the initiatives that we will be taking on as we go forward to get this done.
Okay. And finally, you mentioned 2 terms. That's what you said.
Yes.
We'll see how that goes.
Still 2 terms.
Nothing's going to change your mind.
No, listen, there are a lot of talented Grenadians in Grenada who could help run, manage, and serve the country. And so we don't need to obsess over one person. I actually think by the time I'm done, I've met 3 or 4 young women. I've met 3 or 4 young women who told me, one told me 2 Sundays are back in Las Vegas. Nice to meet you, and I'll be taking this job from you. And that's what I want to hear. So it means I've inspired them. It means they feel they can do the job as well. And if I've done that, then I've kind of done my job.
So talking about doing your job, after the 2 years, the 2 terms, what sort of legacy do you want to leave when people speak of Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that would be important to me is the fact that you had someone who held the office and who was genuine and true, first to himself, and then genuine and true to the people of Grenada. Because some of the painful experiences I think I've sort of had as Prime Minister is looking at some of the decisions which have been made, which honestly have nothing to do with the people of Grenada. It has nothing to do with the government of Grenada. Oftentimes it's just ego, self-aggrandizement, and nothing but actually developing the country. And we are paying significant, we are paying back as a nation significantly for this, and we can give examples. We can take examples of the Kawana Bay situation, right, where you've created a dispute. Even if you might have had an issue with someone where you could have simply sat and negotiated out, you've created a dispute that now the country is facing millions and millions of dollars potentially in losses arising from that. It's just sitting there, and it's sitting on perhaps the most spectacular view of Grandlands Beach, and it's essentially almost a monstrosity. And we now have to clean that up. One of the things that's been very painful is that we have a situation where the former administration essentially sold diplomatic passports to all kinds of people, right? What is the consequences for us as Grenadians if you have people showing up at an airport and they're on the Interpol list and they have a diplomatic passport?
So there are no checks and balances?
None, right? And I'm saying, and you have a CBI program where people are put through the ringer before they can get an ordinary Grenadian passport. And yet still you're handing out diplomatic passports with little or no checks or balances. That's the kind of stuff that it's painful for me to even talk about as a citizen, because frankly it's embarrassing, right? And you call yourself a sovereign nation and that's how you behave, which means you, in my view, do not care about the citizens of the country, the reputation of the country, and how we are perceived internationally. And those are some of the issues that, in a sense, we have to make sure that we bring back the integrity and we bring back the respect and dignity, frankly, to being an independent country. And that's part of what we have to deal with. But I think for me, what I really, from a legacy perspective, I think the education system, the healthcare system, and the whole question of food security. I think we can address, or at least begin to address those things so that, 15, 20 years from now, you can see the benefits of it in terms of where we are as a population, where we are as a country. I'd be happy. And then finally, I will end on it, the environment. Grenada is a lovely place. We really have to take care of it. We are really littering too much. There's garbage all over the place. And in the places we claim we love, the beaches, the picnic sites, and so on. So it's one of the things that I really want to encourage us to begin to realize it's our island. We met it beautiful. Let's keep it beautiful. Let's keep it clean.
Okay. Fantastic. Now, that's a beautiful way to end. But before you go, of course, you're celebrating your 1 year in office, apart from being the Prime Minister as a political party. Anything else you'd like to share where that is concerned and how persons can be part of your...
Yes, absolutely. There are a number of activities. Well, I will start with a little St. David's Mass. On Sunday, we're having a little Father's Day celebration in Las Vegas. We're going to have live music. I believe Edson Mitchell King Ajama will be there singing some gospel music as well. So we want to encourage, residents of St. David's in particular to come out and celebrate Father's Day with us and celebrate the activity. We're going to have fun, play some sports, play some cricket, play some football, play some dominoes, eat and share, break bread with each other. So that's Sunday coming. Next week, we have a number of activities planned. I should probably point it on Saturday. I'm also going to Carriacou. We can't forget P.T. Martinique and Carriacou in this. So I'll be visiting Saturday for the day. Next week, we have a number of events planned. We have a national address, which will be delivered on the 21st. On the 22nd, we have a town hall in Grenville Secondary School in St. Andrew. And then on the 23rd itself, the big day, we have a day of national prayer, culminating with a candlelight vigil at the Last Just Playing Field. So come out, prayer, worship, bring your candles. We're trying to discourage open flames, obviously for safety purposes. But we want people really to come out. So we're inviting all churches, all creeds, all denominations from the Rastafarians come down to come and celebrate with us. And then on Sunday, we have a fundraiser at the National Stadium, a grand bingo, and entertainment at this stadium, because obviously we have to pay for all of this, and we have to keep the party going. So we want to encourage folks to come out. Those who like to play the bingos, you can bring your family, bring your friends to come out to the bingo.
So you're trying to challenge Waggy T?
No, not at all. I think in fact we're relying on Waggy. I think we have to borrow Waggy's bingo cards. So it's not competition. It's a one-off, once a year type event. And let me not forget, because I spoke about Last Address, I spoke about St. Andrews, I spoke about the national address, I spoke about Carriacou. We can't leave out the West Coast. To the people of St. John, St. Mark, St. Patrick West, we also will be having a dance this Friday in St. John, proper party, so people can come out, have a good time, get good food, get good music.
Where will that be?
It is in St. John. I have to get I don't have the venue off the top of my head, but I'll certainly get them to indicate that. So a full set of activities across the island, again, demonstrating our desire to share the pie all over the island rather than having the activities just in
and
one
folks
location.
In Canada who are waiting you, they're saying, what about them?
Right. Well, Canada, in the 1st of July, I'll be there. I'm traveling, I think, on the 29th. We have a grand gala. And thereafter, we also will have a town hall engagement with our diaspora. So I look forward to seeing everyone in Toronto. It's been a while since I have been to Toronto, I think 2019, and then we had COVID. So I haven't been there since, so I certainly look forward to the engagement. So come on out, support the gala, and let's meet and get the opportunity to talk and see how the diaspora can continue helping to serve. Thank you.
And your final word, your greatest wish for Grenada, the final word.
Wishes. I think, I will probably say this, which is something I haven't spoken about. I really do want Grenada to remain a safe place. A place where people are at ease, a place where you don't have to look over your shoulder, a place where there's little or no crime. And I say this because, I had a bit of a reunion with a friend of mine who went to school here. Last week, I hadn't seen him for probably 25 years. And his dad died, I think 2 weeks ago, and he came back. And so we met up. And it was a slightly disturbing conversation because, his wife asked if we have drills here. And I was like, what do you mean by drills? And then the kids were saying that in their school, because of the amount of mass shootings you have in the U.S., that part and parcel of school life in America is that you have drills as to what to do if there's a shooting.
Duck and roll.
And I sat there and I was blown away because it was like,
Never even
I can't even imagine that this is a conversation that I'd have to have if I was a parent with my children about. It seems to me at war. And so we can't take our own safety and the peacefulness of Grenada for granted. And that, for me, from a wish perspective, if we can live in harmony with each other, if we can minimize crime, if we can help each other when someone is in time of need, that would be, in a sense, my greatest wish, because I think everything else will come thereafter.
I think so, too. Mr. PM, thank you so very much. Did you come bringing gifts as well?
Yes, I have a little token, if I can find it.
Denise Parkland-Gain.
Yes.
You want it in the studio as well. Thanks, everyone.
I'm permitted to get up.
Yes, of course.
All right. Well, this is just a little token of our appreciation.
And the office of the Prime Minister. Prime
Minister. Can I? All right.
Let me take out my mic.
And it's all local, huh? So that's the first thing you should say. Only local goodies in here.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. And then we have the boss lady.
Yes.
For your token. Come through.
I'm not familiar with you.
Cross over.
No,
Soon government of Grenada.
We can still get a little lawyer representation.
I know that.
Thank you very much.
There There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Support and promote all our agro processes and so on. So I've told
Thank
them
you.
that we will not
Thanks
do
for
any
coming.
gifts that is not made in Grenada.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Mr. PM, thanks so much.
Camille, it's been a pleasure. I hope next time you invite me, we'll not talk about politics and all that, but something else.
Yes,
All right.
very much so.
Alrighty. And that just about concludes our conversation with the Honorable Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. And of course, thank you so much to everyone on the live. Those of you listening via radio, thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, at our regular programming. So again, everybody, have a good one. And thank you so much to our camera guys for an amazing job as usual. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you guys tomorrow.